Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Raf Tav on Mix 94.7 FM, and thanks for joining us today. Before I introduce my guest, I guess I'll say that I'm glad to have this individual here with me because I remember her when I was a student, and I've had her I was a student of hers in high school at St. Martin Academy, then again at USM. And I must say that, you're a great teacher, especially when it comes to creative writing, English, etc., which, of course, is your major, your specialty. And I like to get into that along with some pretty interesting stuff that you've done, over the years. And so good afternoon to you, Miss Ward, and thanks for being here.
Good afternoon to you, Ralph, and radio audience. I am very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Good. So, my first question for you, as you introduce yourself to us, is actually I'm curious about, what has teaching varying students taught you about yourself and your profession?
I think automatically, thinking about your question, some people would say patience. But sometimes for me, it helps me think of potential, right? I have to always remember that it's not in the moment that I'm going to be living in. I have to teach you this and that's it. I have to understand that this is an individual who will one day be a part of society, and I must always think of their potential and add other things to my lesson to help garner and shape that person into an individual that I can say, wow, later.
And how is that like, especially given that you have to do that for so many? I think the average classroom size is maybe 15, 20?
15, 20. So right now, my biggest class is 21. And it's a day-to-day thing. And you have to come in ready and aware of what you're doing. Because let's say for today, if I let just one moment get to me, I might get frustrated. But it's not about me. At the end of the day, it's about the student. And even though it's not a one-on-one, which would be much more effective, you try to work on it. You try to pay attention to certain students and say, well, today I'm going to focus on, I notice that this is going on with you, or where you want to be, what's going on with you. So I try to, as much as possible, keep the vision in mind and look at the student for who they will become, and to know that I can treat them as such.
Now, I'd like to peel back a bit then, with start off with that introduction, because one, teaching is in your blood, in the sense of your mom is a well-known teacher at the Mac School, Miss Ward. And was that something that you always wanted to do from since you were young? I know some persons kind of want to walk in their parents' footsteps and then others not. So what made you end up in the position you're in now in front of the classroom?
I think number one, when you have a particular skill set, there's an assumption, and then there's also what vision do you have for yourself in the time that you're doing what you're doing. So if you have it, it's needed, you do it in that sense. My mom was a phenomenal teacher, and not because she's my mother. No, she was. This was something that she dedicated herself to, and she really, really cared, right? And she has been doing it for forever, since she was 19. Now, when I was growing up, my mantra was, never, ever, ever. And then it happened.
The backstory of what it is to be a teacher. Yeah.
So I always come to this profession as myself. I can't do anybody else. I can't pretend to care. I can't pretend to be curious or whatever the case is. So for me, the skill set was needed at the time, and I jumped right in. Not only that, the vacation days are always awesome. So it's give and take. I get to engage with people who I never know where they might end up later, and I might need them in that capacity. I think of it that way. And on the other hand, it's like, well, while there is a potential to burn out if you're not careful, I get to rest. I get to pursue the things that I truly love as well. So in that sense, I'm not really following path. I'm just providing a service at this time because it's needed.
Yeah, and that is specifically your English teacher.
Yeah.
So I guess what also made you want to study English, and where did you study, and what was that like?
Oh my goodness. So I don't know if you were the kind of student or the kind of person who were obsessed. You were obsessed with reading. Reading like mystery novels and watching forensic shows. Initially, I was thinking of doing forensics. I was in the chemistry physics program at St. Martin Academy. But I came to realize my second year of college at Pace University, New York, that I didn't quite love organic chemistry that much. I was more into the writing of it. So I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books on mystery and that type of thing. But I was in love with the words, not the science. From there, it flipped, and I changed my degree to English and Communications. And I was fortunate that my university had that program available. It would have been another story if, you're studying at a university and it's only, let's say, science and you can't change. You have to, shift everything. So for me, words was always a passion. It was always a love. It was always a way to express myself. It's always a way to go deeper into the human experience. And I love that, I would, one sentence would make me go like, okay, yeah, this is good. For other people, it's not their thing. And that is very okay. But words for me, that's my area. Very much.
Gotcha. So what I'm curious about then is, something you often hear people say is that, if you speak English, why don't you write, quote unquote, proper English or write properly? Sometimes what people say in regards to people's writing, So, as an English teacher especially, what is something you realize most students struggle with when it comes to the English subject, but also the key things people need to understand when it comes to writing English?
I think the first thing we need to remember is that any type of language is communication. That's the basis. And then who are you writing your message for, right? So you have the speaking and then you have the writing. Now, if you're just sending a message to your best friend and you want to, type in abbreviations and that's between you and her, But what I've noticed is that a lot of students struggle with the standardization, but not every student, because there are some students who have in their arsenal a second language. So that helps them to now conjugate verbs, put things together, because they already have somewhat of a language structure with their own personal language, and then you have the standard English. For others, it's just plain laziness, to tell you the truth, flat out laziness, because I noticed that after a time, there are certain things that you forget or you refuse to acknowledge. Subject-verb agreement, it's just not important. And a student told me that one time, and I was like, whoa, shock. She was writing on the board. It was the end of the school year, and she was just writing and doing her thing. And I'm like, really? And she's like, but miss, we on vacation, school finish. And I realized then and there, it's almost like I get to be myself. I just get to write, and instead of having to conform to a standardized version of something that I'm learning. So they felt a little bit freer expressing themselves as is. So for me, there is a difference, and we need to be intentional about keeping the difference and knowing where to put it.
Yeah, because you do see it translate sometime into the workplace and so forth, and that's a bad look.
Yeah, it is a bad look. But again, it's who are you speaking to within the confines of work as well.
Yeah.
Because when you're on lunch break, the same Martin and you will come out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you said something that I've been curious about, especially as it relates to getting students to express themselves. How is that like, and how do you go about it? Especially, when you know someone has a lot in them, but they just refuse to let it out. So what has been your experience like in working with students in that situation?
Working with students, it's been interesting. Let's say, for example, I would let them just express themselves. If you make it about the standardization all the time, you're gonna get you're not gonna get the flow, right? So when you're writing, you sometimes in the process of writing, you generate ideas. So let students write without stopping. And you can see the hesitation in them, because it's like, but I think I made a spelling error just now and I want to go back. No. Just go. Let it go. And that's one of the things that I'm noticing. There's a hesitation to just be free, right? And I don't think we understand the process properly then, because if you cannot express yourself freely, how can you work with what's in you and refine it? So for me, it's like, get it out express yourself, and then when you're done, you can go back now and edit and create and form and fix things accordingly. What I do also find is that what comes out is also interesting. Whenever students write stories, their stories are taking place abroad. And I'm like, but you don't live Colby? Why that can't happen in Colby? You don't live Dutch Quarter? Use where you are. And there's a disconnect in some students where our location is not a valid setting to write stories or to write or anything, you know, our location, our looks sometimes, because there's automatically a blonde hair person with blue eyes. And it's like, so what happened to brown hair? What happened to brown eyes? You know? So I try to give them the space to be free first, and then we could work on formatting.
So then what do you attribute that to, though? Basically what you just explained in terms of what would you say it's the media consumption that of them, or
Well, it could be media, but it also could be insecurities. At that age, you're trying to figure out who you are. And of course, peers might be telling you, I don't like how that looks on you. And therefore, you start to seek out what is valid in society and in somebody else's society as well. You know, so it varies because, of course, not every child is like that. Not every child is insecure. Not every child is in praise of other places. They can glorify where they are. You know, they could write about their grandmother, and they could write about eating chicken leg and Johnny cake on a certain time. You know, they're conscious and aware of their surroundings, and others are not. And I find that interesting.
Yeah. Do you think maybe that could also be a form of escapism, like, you know, trying to put themselves elsewhere?
But elsewhere is what they're always seeing. You know, so when I think about even like the books that we read in school, there's not a lot of local.
Okay, I was also.
You see that? There's not a lot.
Next question to you,
There was a book I was reading recently. I finished it off, and it's based in the States or in Canada. There's snow, and then there's cold, and I'm thinking to myself, but why is this even on the syllabus? I'm like, what's the point? Because at one point there's this like monster in the basement kind of vibe, and I'm like, yeah, somebody here could have write that.
Yeah.
And it could have been on the syllabus, you know. So there's a little disconnect, at least in my opinion.
But then who has that say? Is it the school board? You know, because it's not to say that we don't have local books that can be introduced in the school.
When I asked the question about the book, it was on the syllabus for CXC, a suggestion. You see?
So for CXC itself.
It was on the list of books for CXC at that level, because I teach the lower forms right now. Yeah.
So then I guess I'm curious about maybe someone else will have to answer this. What sort of suggestions do we make to CXC? You know, because while you know CXC offers a good
selection,
you know, and syllabus, or you know, it can be improved. You know, especially even when it comes to history. I think with that should be something of our tailoring, because like I did appreciate learning Caribbean history, you know, in school. It meant a lot, but then you still just had that lack of Martin history.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, though, it's sometimes we tend to want to go after institutions to say, oh, we need to fix this and change things. But at the end of the day, these children don't live in school. They attend activities outside of school. There are activities that are created for them to attend as well. So there are other ways in which we can reach them, you know, and they have access to the kinds of books that we want them to read.
Yeah, they do. So I'm curious about, you know, as far as books and writing is concerned, for persons who, you know, would want to explore creative writing but feel like something that's daunting. How do you start? And what are the key thing that you need to apply, you know, or just keep in mind as you write?
Go at it in bits and pieces. How do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite, bit by bit. First off, know that you have the right to write. You have the right to create. So give yourself that type of permission. You can create. That's the first thing. And then just be aware of what you're interested in, it doesn't mean that, oh, just because it's creativity, you have to write about flowers or love. Or, you could write about how you almost burn up your food in the frying pan the other day and do something creative from it. So it's culture. It's what you do. So for me, daunting, put it behind you. Try to figure out why you think it's daunting. And maybe it's overwhelming, but those things can be addressed by doing it piece by piece. What is it that you want to do? Who do you want to reach? And how are you going to approach this project? You want to write a book? What kind of book? For who? What topic? What are you interested in? So these basic things, you need to first figure it out. I'd like to kind of like place it in the area of a business where you need to have a mission and vision for what your project is before you get started, right? So in that sense, I would say surround yourself with a community of writers as well. If you are trying to write something and you're hanging out with people and you're telling them, listen, I want to write this poem, or I want to write this song, and they're just not interested, it's going to kind of affect you in a way. You're going to be like, okay, it's not important, forget this. So for me, community is very important, also bit by bit, piece by piece. And from there, allow yourself first to, of course, be free to let those things out, and then check out the mentors that you can take on. Who is writing? What type of writing do you like? Who do you like to read? And you start from there.
I would like to go back a bit then. I appreciate your response to that question.
Thank you.
To the variation books, that we have available to us. From your take and experience, what are some of your, some of those local books that have stood out to you, with even regional books as well that you would encourage persons to read, pick up and read?
So I had a little moment with Caribbean Literature Day. I think it was last October. So I went on a binge and bought a lot of books. One of my favorite books right now is from a Jamaican writer. It's called One Sky Day. It is hilarious. It is very thick, but it is like magical realism. Everybody in the island has like magical powers. They could talk to cats. They could like season food with their hands, and it's very local, very Caribbean, very relatable. That's one I had really like. One Sky Day. Anything with Edwidge Danticat is just like yes.
Yeah.
She had a collection recently. Everything is everywhere or something along those. It's very recent, last year. So anything with Edwidge Danticat, those books, I could think of off the top of my head. And I just finished one called How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by, I think, a Bayesian writer. So anything current is really good.
I think Edwidge Danticat, Everything Inside.
Yes, Inside.
Okay, yeah,
yes,
just
that's
it.
it.
Up, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Danticat, she's a phenomenal writer indeed. Yeah. And then, so my next question to you was also, what does writing do for a person? If you could elaborate on that, because for me, I see writing as one of those skills that no matter how much technology advances will be necessary, because, even if you look at your favorite Netflix series, Hulu, Disney Plus, whatever, the animation is great, the acting is great, but what those elements need to bring to life, is what is written, the emotions, the stories. But also writing can be used in business. It is necessary for science, even for apps and all of that. Right. So what does writing do for a person? Why should people write?
When I think of it, people eat, animals eat. People communicate in terms of, hi, how are you doing? Animals do the little thing as well. When I think about writing, I'm thinking about a higher level cognition, because writing is almost like the highest level when you think about it. Because when you go to school, you start to form letters, sentences, paragraphs, expression. Writing is something that is super essential for humanity, right? Because not only do we get to capture what our ideas are, but we also get to move the spirit and the soul. We get to give instructions. You know, everything that you buy these days come with a manual, or these days, I guess, a video that you could see how to do it. But at the end of the day, you still need the writing, as you were
create
saying.
the script.
Writing gets you in touch with yourself, what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and that's essential. Technology doesn't quite do that. So when I say technology, I mean, like, for example, when you get an app to calculate finances, for example, it's not soul level. It's not emotion level. And when you're writing, it connects you with the human part of yourself, is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Because animals don't write, you know, they don't. But when you do, you have the different types of writing that you engage in. And instead of talking to somebody, you could slip them a little letter or email. And all of these things are, you know, under the scope of writing. And it's essential. I don't see writing going extinct. And if it does, it will be because the laws prevent it, like it did back in slavery. You're not allowed to write.
Yeah, to write and read. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Yeah, I'm glad you put it in that way, because one thing I did read is that, you know, you've been writing for a very long time, since you've been into poetry since high school.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how has your writing process evolved as well, especially, you know, poetry, which is quite a unique art form in itself, in writing form. How have your process evolved into breaking down, not breaking down, but joining your wills for expression, but also let's say the rules of literature in the same breath?
Okay. So when I was younger, and I was writing much younger, before high school, it was just to get the emotions out. And anyhow, and anyway, just get it out. As I'm going, the funny thing is, I didn't do literature in high school. That was interesting when I look back on it. So when I was writing in high school, I was just putting things together that I think made sense to my high school mind. Because I remember a particular mentor telling me, and he was reading one of my poems, he's like, yeah, you have like 5 different topics in one little thing, and it's all over the place. So I remember that specific moment, and I'm realizing now I've gotten better at focusing, honing, and choosing certain words to you know, express certain things. So it has grown tremendously because of writing, because of reading other writers, because of inspiration from local writers, you know, Debbie, Jack, and whoever else. So for me, it's something that I did often, and I didn't just do it for doing it. I was improving along the way. I was getting better and better at it. I would listen to other poets express. I would listen to what really connected with me and what they said. What am I interested in, right? So for me, it's been quite a journey. In that journey was also quite a bit of fear, because I was like, well, everybody's saying, when are you going to write a book? And I'm like, there was some fear that this could go away. That if I finish the book, that's it. And it's like, oh, I'm dried up. There's nothing else. There was that fear as well. So at one point, it became, this is never even meant for you. You're writing, but it's not for you. You started off writing for yourself, but it's not meant for you. It's somebody else has to hear this. So it became a mission to just get it out, because somebody else needed it. But I have grown, and I'm still growing, because I'm now even accepting what my role is. You know, before, if you're doubting yourself, you're kind of half in, half out. Oh, I think this is okay. I mightn't. Now it's like, you want this? Okay, bam. This is the process. Let's go. Here you go.
I really appreciate your response with that, because I know that basically you've taken some steps to get to the point where you've published your own book. And one of them being you had your poetry featured in one of Lasana's compilations.
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken,
Where
right?
I See the Sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you came to the decision that you want to publish, you want to put together your own book, what were the main things that you considered? And for anyone who was interested in writing a book, what would you say are the main things that you need to have down pat?
Okay, to get your book together, first off, gather your work. Because literally my work was all over the place. It was the book over there, it was under the bed, it was over here, all over. It was written on my phone, it was on my email, all over. So for me, if you consider yourself that you want to do this seriously, get it together, put it together. And I sat down and I wrote out every single complete poem, the titles. I wrote them out and I said, okay, these are done. Let me go back over them and see now what's going on. Another thing that you need to consider as well is sometimes you can't see what you have. So it's also good to have a reader, somebody else who could ask you, what did you mean by this? Can you clarify that? That's another thing. Consider how you're going to publish with somebody else, self-publish, what format you're going to use. Is it going to be a digital copy? Is it going to be a physical copy? With writing, like any business, comes the idea of finance. You need to ask yourself, how much are you willing to also spend, and when, and where? Right? So there's things to consider, not just, book, Xerox. You can go that route as well, because there's people who I don't really care about being all fancy. I just want to give 50 of my closest friends my work, and that's that. You see? So kind of figure out what works for you and bring it together. Get a team or at least another person to help you with the process.
Yeah, so kind of like the mission and vision you stated from before. Yeah, gotcha. The one part of writing and just creating anything is always critique. How do you handle critique and recommend persons take feedback? Especially if it comes across harsh.
Absolutely great question, because number one, who is giving you the critique? That's the first thing, and that's very important, because you might be thinking, here's a friend, they care about me, and then they would tell me, that's nice, this is really good. And you start to feel a little kind of, okay, shoulders square, you feel better about yourself, and you go to somebody who knows the art, and they, like you say, they come off as harsh. Go into your little corner, beat up the wall, cry, do what you got to do, and then ask yourself, now, is this critique for me to improve or just to make me feel bad? Right? If you figure it's just to make you feel bad, go to somebody else. But if they give you the same harsh critique, it's time to pay attention and ask yourself, okay, so how can I make it better? And based on what they say. And if they didn't give you much information, go back and say, listen, I'm glad that you gave me this critique, but where exactly do I need to tweak? What did you see? What's wrong? So in that sense, give yourself the humanity to express yourself. You didn't feel good about it. It was, I didn't like how you said that. But you go back and you say, okay, so what can I do to make it better? Gotcha. So it depends on who critiques you. Right?
Yeah, you're right on that one. So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the news behind the news with Raf Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Miss Rochele Ward, an author, educator, and blogger as well. And so as we are speaking about, writing and English teaching and stuff, you published your first book, Tangle.
Yes.
Why Tangle, and what's it all about?
So my first book is, as you said, called Tangle. Tangle is the title of one of the poems in there. And I was on someone's porch, a renowned St. Martina in the arts. And she had those wind chimes on her porch. And it was a wooden wind chime with butterflies. And I was looking at it and I'm realizing that it's all knotted up. So without thinking that, Rochele, you're not in your own home, I went towards the wind chime and I started to fix it. And I felt better because I'm like, okay, good, it's falling the correct way and the butterflies are free. And when I was done, she's like, you're the first person to do that, everybody doing that. So I was like, From that came a poem and I'm like, why is it that my spirit feels funny when that looks that way? Because the butterflies are fragile, why are they all tangled up? So what happened was, after looking at the collection, my publishers realized that it's not just the butterflies that are tangled, it's society, it's culture, it's history, it's things that we don't talk about and things that we do. So Tangle became you could say mantra or the overarching theme in the collection.
Yeah. Okay, got you. And what are some of the other pieces that stood out to you the most as well?
So I could tell you that it's categorized in different themes. So we have things like Spitfire, right? Spitfire meaning a little bit of historical background, right? And Spitfire, especially because women back in slavery days who talk back and had that kind of attitude. That's the vibe given off in that one. We went back into my history where I told my story. And I like to start my story off by saying that I was kidnapped by my mother because she went back home to Nevis to have me. All right, so I call that a kidnapping. And I talk about things like, hotels, that hotels have a particular look, meaning sometimes they look like they're ours. Because there's a hotel in Nevis that I remember that the mural on the hotel was very cultural, local people on there. And I went back several years later, like decades later, and it was just a gray wall. So it was like a wiping out of, and I was like, oh, that's kind of, what's going on here? Because before it used to be ours. You have the representation of culture on the walls. And when I went back, gray, So those kinds of things, nature. Of course, salt pond got to be in there, right? I talk about the men in society, so I have that titled Kings. There was a particular incident that happened. You're familiar with Cameron Hyman. Mm-hmm. I hadn't been writing frequently, so once in a while I would give myself a challenge. So I would say, for example, I went to his exhibition and I said, Rochele, you're not leaving here until you write a poem for each picture. And I stood up and I was just walking from picture to picture, writing out the poems. So
that's quite a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and that happened. And another challenge that I gave myself. So you could do that if you're writing and you're like stuck, put yourself in that position. I went to Pace University, as mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So I was in the States when 9/11 happened, but my university was outside in the countryside. But I didn't go down to ground zero all those years I was in New York. So I went back to New York after about 10, 15 years, and then I went to ground zero. And from that experience, I had several pictures. From those pictures, I pull poems. See, so poetry for me is just like, it's life, it's breathing, it's the clouds, it's the experiences, and then putting them together. So this is just a whole collection of awesome and interesting experiences, challenges, issues, ways of life, right? Because I think at the end of the day, St. Martin has a collection of many little stories. Yours mightn't match my stories, but it happened in this space, and I still get to share those stories with you.
And one of the things that you shared, one of the things that I took note of is that, you've been building yourself consistently too with your writing. And I reference that in terms of you've also done a lot of blogging, obviously blog Saltfish and Lace. How did that name come about, by the way?
Why? I was trying to find out what is it that makes me, my location, my content different. And when I thought about it, I'm like, well, number one, salt. And I was thinking at the time, well, this is going to be like a lifestyle blog. We will do food, fashion, different things. So I was like, okay. So we have saltfish. Anybody from the Caribbean can identify with that food.
True.
And then on top of that, I was like, you know what? I'd like the idea of juxtaposing something kind of gritty with something kind of delicate and beautiful. So I was like, saltfish and lace. And that's where that came about. Yeah. And
what are some of the main things that you blog about it, but in terms of that makes your blog stand out compared to, let's say, maybe other Caribbean blogs as well?
So one of the things that I made note of is I like photography. I think any creative tend to dabble in different things, because sometimes you get kind of frozen up in one area and it's like, So when the poetry was on pause, photography. And one of the things I am proud of on my blog is that I went around the island and I was taking pictures of our older houses, the classical Caribbean houses, on Front Street, in Mount William Hill, different places. And I think I got up to maybe 5 or 6. It could be more. But when I was doing them, for me it was just like, oh, I like this. This is something that is us, right? And rare, because you don't have as much as before.
Yeah.
Maybe because we have so much construction going on that you don't see that type of construction. Right. So when I did that, I kind of fell off a little bit, because here and there, you have your little challenges, so you kind of pause on the things that you were working on. I kid you not, After working on that little project, couple of years later, one of the houses were wiped out.
Wow.
And I was the one on Mount William Hill next to the old school, Martin Luther King School. There was a little
Yes,
pinkish
okay.
house.
I know you're talking about,
And one
yeah.
time I was just driving over and I'm like, oh my goodness, where the house went? So then I was like, oh my goodness, it's vital that we keep
document, yeah.
record of these things, you know? And I was kind of like, okay, good. So for me, that was one of the unique things that I was able to do.
Interesting.
With that blog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So then with that, one of the initiatives that I've known you for, I think you started since I was in high school, was Don't Break the Comb. Where did that come from? And how looking back at that movement, I would say, how has that been?
So Don't Break the Comb came about collaboration. I tend to think about the things that I get a lot of compliments on and try to focus in on, okay, so why are people always asking me about my hair, or why they always say this or that? So one of those things are natural hair. So I met a young lady who's also interested in the same thing. That was in 2013. And from there, we kind of created events, reached out to the community, and that was a very big feedback from women around the island. Eventually, she went her way, I went mine, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do now? So what I continued to do was highlight natural hairstyles on Facebook. And that grew into like 50K
Wow.
followers. And all I made sure of was that the pictures were good looking and people had ideas of what other styles that they could use. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And of course, I have a little bit of struggle with consistency in certain things because, again, my interests abroad. But that happened. And eventually somebody reached out to me and said, well, if you're doing this, why not start selling products? So I was attracting certain things into my life, so I started to sell products. Hair products, head wraps. At one point I had natural hair dolls. So for me, it was like, we need to have representation visually as well as assistance, because not everybody, at the time had the community, had the confidence to do what was not even required, but to do what was their choice to do.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to keep your hair natural, but at the same time, why not?
Yeah, because
why not?
Yeah, because especially when you think of the fact that in part of you not doing so is because of a perception that has been a projection, rather. That natural is bad, natural is unprofessional, natural is
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it ties into like was it Chris Rock's documentary,
Right.
Good Hair?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
which I find like every student should watch.
But why have them watch that? Where's our good hair stories on St. Martin in the Caribbean? And I've seen that film writers in Trinidad also created a hair documentary as well.
You know
so
the
for
name
me,
of that?
the name is Hair. I can pass it on to you in terms of who. But that helped me to think again. Hair is a very diverse topic.
True.
You can go from the aspect of, like you mentioned, being professional or not professional. You can go from the aspect of how to do it, because some people don't know how to.
Yes.
And from there, we have like an explosion of videos and bloggers. And because remember back in the day when we used to go to school, no one could ever say way back that, yeah, when I get older, I'm going to be a blogger. That didn't even exist. When I get older, I'm going to have a YouTube channel. What?
Yeah,
So there's a whole load of career opportunities that now open up because of, social media.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at it now and I'm saying, well, at the time, it was very much needed. It's still needed today, right? But now you have access to information.
Yeah, you did. You're right. You did it at a great time, because that, I guess I would say, boom of natural hair acceptance and 4C and all the different products. I would say came from like 2015, 16, etc. To the point where it's just commonplace.
It's commonplace.
Especially like having went to HBCU, it was just dominant. While and the other hair types, whether it's a weave or wig, then you get into conversation of protective hair, protective
Protectives,
styles,
yeah.
and so it was really a good time, and I really admired that movement. I would say, because it was just widespread, and I like that one of the events that you did is still on YouTube. Had women from different age groups as well talk about hair, with who had locks, who didn't have hair, and so it's great.
So what I tried to do this month, because I went back to the video and I'm like, wow, it's been a while, So I decided to use a different medium now. So I started to have mini interviews with women and let them talk about their hair. So that is starting tomorrow. I would have a premiere with the first naturalista who is rocking her locks,
Cool.
Miranda Matthew. So she talks about her experience
TikTok,
and
by the way.
everything. Put it on TikTok?
You have to. Like, I know people feel like TikTok is a kid's thing, but trust me,
It's the
TikTok.
So I'm just
it's a right
Snapchat.
platform. Nah,
Because I realize that these things are coming and then it's
Snapchat,
like,
I know, right?
There's like a little boom. Snapchat is everything.
Snapchat is
And
good
it goes
still
on.
for the filters. No one uses Snapchat. TikTok is the place.
So for now, I'm promoting on Instagram
Cool.
and Facebook, and I can see if I take on TikTok because it's like literally you got to manage this entire thing by itself.
Yes,
you
I
know?
understand.
But I am excited about that. I'm excited about that because we get to tell our stories too. Why does the person have to be from America? We have stories here too.
Yeah.
And that's for me with anything. We have stories here too. Film. That's an entire community of jobs if we take on a film industry. And we have the capacity for it.
From sound engineers
And we
to
have the capacity for
production,
it.
etc. Yep.
And we have the place to show it.
Yeah.
You know?
and variations of scenes,
Yes.
different settings.
Yes.
We could literally do 1900s or futuristic.
anything. And I think we should be open to that idea of having that type of creative life on the island, because people from abroad come to the islands to film their movies and then they go about their business.
Yes.
And then they call the island something that they want to call it. And you're like, well, that don't look like Great Bay.
Yeah.
You know?
Gullah Gullah Island or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that is something to consider. So
Definitely.
for me,
Definitely, yeah. Because, like I said, I really appreciate to see how persons just really embrace natural hair care. And it's good to be among pioneers, I would say, at least with the social, digital age of it. It's because a lot of these conversations have been in existence, but they evolve. The platforms also change, which
the
is why
hairstyles change too,
Sorry?
The hairstyles change
That too.
Because I read a book on the history of, like, a historical view of Afro-textured hair, and it is cyclical, meaning it would start off 90s, rocking the natural, and then boom, it comes around, and then everybody's jerry curl or whichever one you want to go, and then street.
Yeah.
And then we have lace fronts now, So for me, it's
And the baby hairs.
and the baby,
Which is also kind of
that
like
is
a 90s
scariness because people
throwback.
sticking them things on their head now, and it's like, nah. What do you think about our hair when you have to lay it down like that? And this is the subconscious question now. If our hair normally stands up, what's the issue with? I know you like the curls, but do we have to, put our hair on the submission again?
Yeah, because I found it interesting, like when I learned that for example, braiding is, I say donkey years old, but
it's forever.
It's super old, like that. You're talking hundreds of years back, and I was like, what? Thinking that braids is something kind of modern. This has been done.
It's been forever.
Yeah, and then the art form of it, because
it's beautiful, right?
And creating hairstyles as well. That's a
creativity. Yes, and it's interesting in the sense that even though we have all of that expression, sometimes it's not allowed in certain places, but it's part of who you are as a culture, and I don't know, I just like the variety that we have in terms of stories and how different people approach natural hair and their journey and cutting it all off or growing it all out, so these are expressions that we have access to, and I'm really excited about that particular thing.
Yeah, because that reminds me of, I just quickly Googled it, the Crown Act. The fact that,
Yeah.
for example, in the U.S., they literally had to pass a bill, to ban discrimination based on person's hairstyles.
Yeah.
Like especially like in my school, in J school, we had options to do the varying media journalism outlets, so radio, print, magazine, television, and the television industry. Like we used to have students who graduated would come and give talks, etc. And women especially used to really emphasize like how difficult it is. If you have it all. But unfortunately, the communities are so ingrained in seeing a news anchor or a woman who's a news anchor with straight hair, wig, etc. And it's only now very slowly you're seeing acceptance to, hey, if I have an afro, it's okay. If I have braids, it's okay. But that's another thing, But I'm glad that at least in our space, it's not really much of an issue, but we had to also grow out of certain terminologies, even, and
mindsets.
Exactly.
And mindsets.
Exactly.
Because the mindset is still there that your hair is fix it. What? That's how it comes out my head. What do you mean by fix
Fix
it?
it, yeah.
So it's like you don't have permission to be, and that's a kind of bondage. And that's unfortunate that it still exists.
And a policing.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you have to look at where it comes from.
Oh, we have an idea of where it comes from. It's like we need to be like other people, but we're different.
Correct.
We're very different.
So I would like to end off with, and I'm glad you even start talking about it, but the artistic scene on St. Martin and how it is expanding, evolving. What stands out to you the most, but also what do you see as necessary, to take it to another notch? Yeah. Because we all know, as we always hear, someone has a talent. So that already is settled,
Yeah, I will say it this way. I told my students today some information that I got, and I told them, listen, what's your gift? You need to discover what it is. If it's something artsy, fine. From there, you need to develop it. Get the actual skill set for it, to nurture it. And once you're have nurtured it, you now deploy it. Give it to the community. The art scene on St. Martin, at least me now coming back onto the scenes because I was kind of busy doing certain things, I'm noticing a lot of collaboration going on, and I'm grateful to be a part of that, collaborating in terms of dance, photography, and film and voice, those types of things. And I'm noticing that a lot of millennials are collaborating with each other to present things and give their gift to the community. What I think needs to happen a little bit more is community support. Because I noticed that when you say something like fine arts or art, there's a same community of small community of people who come out, not the masses. And I think it goes right back to school. The fact that students are not really drawn to writing, and because they're not drawn to it, when they go into society, they're not really going to support it that much because it's like, I prefer go fet or to go to a party and enjoy myself, and that's it.
And then it's pitched as just a hobby.
Right.
Yeah, which I think can evolve the community thinking from there.
But again, this idea that you need to develop it. Don't just have a talent and that's it.
Yeah.
You need to develop it and you need to know what could come from it. So for me, that is necessary. The development is necessary. It is there. And if it's not here, you have access to the internet. There is no excuse.
Yeah.
So for me, that's needed. The development of talent. And once it's developed, have a space to present it now to. Wouldn't it be interesting if St. Martin had we have Phillipsburg Cultural Center, but it's just a cultural center. When you need it, you use it. Ongoing theater.
Yeah.
Ongoing.
That would be beautiful.
Oh my goodness.
That would be amazing.
A gallery that is depicting seasonal expressions from different artists, and we can have that kind of community and culture because we have something to offer. People would come and see. We have something to offer. So why not have something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, and because it's also full of it's enriched,
It's enriching.
Yeah.
It is soul.
Yes,
it's necessary.
Definitely. So before we leave, tell us where can people see your work?
Okay, so my work is available on Amazon, RochelleWard.com, through Rochele, myself, And you can also pick it up at Arnia Bookstore.
And then Rochele with LLE?
Yes.
Okay.
Like La Rochelle, the French spelling.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Ward.
Most welcome.
Really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you
And
for
to our
having me.
viewers and listeners, thank you guys as well for joining us. And be sure to join us again tomorrow. Take care.